welcome back. I have Canyon Woodward joining me on the podcast today. Canyon, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks a ton for having me. This is exciting.
Of course. So the first question is always a tough one. Who's Canyon?
Oh God. Man. So yeah, let's see. I'm the youngest of four. Grew up in rural Western North Carolina, the kind of the southern tip of the Appalachians, and grew up outdoors a ton. Got into running a little bit in high school, and really mostly in the past like 6 years or so. And somewhere along the way, got really into climate activism, organizing, to try and get Harvard to divest from fossil fuel companies, and then from there, kind of jumped into a lot of electoral politics, and that's been a big focus of my life in these past years. Those are a couple of the things that make up Canyon, I suppose.
Yeah. And what a time to be involved in the environmental aspect of politics and the environmental aspect in general. Where did that interest begin?
Yeah, man, it is such a time to be involved, in good ways and bad ways. Oh man, but I would say it goes back. My name's Canyon. My siblings are Rivers, Forest, and Autumn. You can probably guess there's a little bit of a environmental outdoors bent from the get go in our upbringing. Super cool, funky parents. So I think I had something of an environmental awareness and ethic growing up, and then being from a rural area, we had a lot of issues as a kid of like acid rain was a thing, and coal mining, mountaintop removal, a lot of backyard stuff that was really intrusive, and then I think a growing awareness of the global water crisis and how climate change is driving us towards some really scary places, especially as it related to water. Is kind of how I started diving deep into it. And when I got to college in 2011, the Keystone XL pipeline fight was really heating up, which became a huge organizing point for environmental activists all over. And I got to get involved a little bit with that on campus, doing organizing work around that, and then from there kind of led into this fossil fuel divestment campaign, and I kind of half joke but mostly serious that was the bulk of my education in college, was organizing on the divestment campaign.
I want to dive a lot more into that. I think we're at this interesting point in time where people are feeling like their actions don't have a huge impact, right? Like it's the kind of thing where if everyone recycles, it makes a difference. But like if you pick up this one piece of plastic and put it in a recycling bin, what is the impact it has? And then on the flip side, we're looking at water consumption, and we're looking, like I live in Colorado, and I was just able to remodel my yard to basically reduce water consumption by 50%. And that to me, like that feels like something that is making an impact, is sustainable. I put solar on the roof. I, put insulation in the attic, and like these are the kinds of things that to me, like it feels like it's more impactful than, like I like to drink seltzer and I go through a lot of cans, but I don't feel like that's recycling those cans it's like a baseline thing to do, but it doesn't feel like, let's all recycle. Am I wrong on that? Am I thinking about it in the right way in terms of like magnitude of impact? Curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of the conversation, is kind of you mentioned the like feeling of helplessness a little bit, like what can I do in the magnitude of a problem like climate change is so hard, and it's something that I think I would imagine most of us struggle with to some extent. It's not like, the river in my community is polluted, so let's like tackle this tangible problem that we can see in the backyard. It's like this is massive. This is, a challenge on the scale that humans haven't really faced before. That's going to take, just wild action to address. And I think in terms of the like what can I do conversation, it becomes just like looking at what are the levers that you as an individual have access to, and thinking about those. I like to think of it less on the individual, like recycling, being vegetarian, etc. Like those are things that I try and do because they do have some impact if they're added up over lots of people. But I think a big shift for me was realizing that, this, because of the magnitude of the crisis that we're facing, it requires huge systemic change. And so that's largely looking at government action, legislation, like the Inflation Reduction Act is a big unexpected step in the right direction. We need way, way more, but because of the scale of the problem, it requires systemic solutions, and that's really hard. But it's also an opportunity to step up and look at what are the institutions that I'm a part of. The United States as a whole, it's a big one. Like how can I take action politically, and then like with divestment, that was a big thing. Is like I'm part of this huge university that has a $40 billion endowment that's invested in oil and gas companies. So what can we do to pressure it to put its money where its mouth is? And I think just like the last thing on the individual versus systemic, just like zooming way out, it's important to look at it's a fact that the oil and gas industry has poured millions and millions of dollars into climate disinformation and a targeted campaign to like put the onus on individuals to be like, what's your carbon footprint? What are you doing to address this crisis? Are you recycling? Are you making the right consumer choices? Which are valid questions, but it's a deliberate attempt to shift the blame from the huge emitters, which are the fossil fuel companies, onto us and our little choices.
That's such a fascinating repositioning of it, because the way I've thought about it is like the little activities versus the big activities. Like to me, the little activities are the recycling, it's eating more plant-based, it's doing these types of things. And the big activities are, the water mitigation and insulating the attic properly and putting solar on my roof. And the way that you frame it is like, okay, those big things are interesting, but like we must create systemic ability to have those things happen at scale. So you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act.
Totally.
I believe the solar credit went from 26% to 30% in that act, which was a huge win. And so like I put solar on in this previous winter into this spring, and like it's an extra $1,000 in my pocket that I didn't do anything for, which is a suggestion of, other people, take advantage of that 30% credit. And it's cool to see the ability to influence at scale by making things like that more accessible. That I'm in Boulder County, and Boulder County offers a free sprinkler system audit. And the sole intention is to reduce water consumption. And so this was flagged in my water bill. Like, call us up, we'll come to your house and we'll reduce consumption. And so I had somebody come over, and he didn't change the yard. He just changed the timing, the direction, and made it a little more efficient and reduced the consumption by 36%, according to his report, just from 45 minutes here. And it's so, like, somebody should be incentivizing that. Like, get $100 if it was free. So that was nice. And then we've talked a lot about solar. Freedom Solar is a sponsor of this podcast, and I chose to work with them because I was so frustrated at how simple the process was with solar and how economically viable it was. Like, if you choose the financing route, you're paying less in month one forever. It's like, it's so simple. And I was like, well, I must tell people this. Like, this is an obligation I now feel I have. And so, to those listening, again, obviously this is a sponsored plug, but it's also, I feel so strongly about it. Like, those that live in North Carolina, Florida, Virginia, Texas, and Colorado, like, these guys are awesome, and it's a for-profit business, but their mission is so important and so, like, real. Not to go on too much of a tangent there, but it's just a fascinating way to think about personal responsibility versus systemic responsibility. And so I think that these are the types of conversations that allow us to vote in different ways and consider who we're putting into positions of power, and truly allows us to vote with our dollars, instead of, like, when you walk into the supermarket, are you buying tofu or are you buying beef? Which added up, it has an impact. But when you multiply the influence over 300 million Americans, now we're talking.
Totally. I think you hit it right on the head. When, going out and buying a Tesla as an individual, that's great if you can afford it, but it's not going to solve the problem. But if we can pass legislation that makes it make sense economically for everyone to buy electric cars, for folks to get heat pumps in their house, for folks to get their sprinkler system audited and insulation upgraded on a wide scale, then it begins to have a big impact.
So how do you use running as your vehicle for this type of influence?
I would say mostly for me, running has contributed to my activism and organizing work, just by, like, bringing me joy and filling up my cup to be a happy, healthy, grounded human who has the energy to keep on with the long distance slog that organizing can be. We face so many setbacks and defeats along the way, and it's exhausting work that a lot of folks burn out of really fast. And so I think for me, running has been a gift, as just like a place for my soul, to just go and connect with the outdoors, the trails, and the places I love, and get a lot out of that. And then I guess more recently, my brother Forrest, who's an amazing filmmaker, he followed Chloe, who is my good friend and co-conspirator, and now the youngest woman senator that Maine has ever had. I was her campaign manager for the last 2 cycles, and my brother Forrest made a short film called Rural Runners that was just like a fun and human look at kind of life on the campaign trail, blended with trail running and kind of the metaphor of running for office and running trails. And we've been using that as a tool to help support candidates and other organizations in the lead up to the midterms.
A strong pun game with the political trail. Running for office. I love that. And you've run some pretty long distances. You did it UTMB this year. You've chased FKTs. Talk to me about the overlap of. You said it just now. Like it's a slog, whether it's running or whether it's campaigning, and people burn out. And so, talking about the overlap of your ability to endure, or you're in it for the long run. Shameless podcast name plug intended. Talk to me about that and how running helps fuel your ability to persist and endure.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably everyone listening to this relates in some way to just like how powerful it is to commit to something, to like plant your flag in the future, like whether that's a race 4 months down the line or 8 months or what have you, and know that you're going to do that thing and you're going to get to that finish line, and it just making that commitment makes kind of everything, or at least I find makes everything flow from there. It's like, okay, I'm going to be doing this race, and so I know that I'm going to be putting in the miles day in and day out to get there. And organizing is kind of similar, especially organizing around an election where it's like, all right, we're going ham until election day. We're gonna stack the hay in the barn, and we're gonna give it everything we've got and leave everything out there on the course, because these are the days that count, whether it's organizing or whether it's doing your workouts. And I think there's something special about that time bounded, goal oriented commitment where it's just like the process day in and day out to get there. And I think especially for me, blending the two, so much of my work is computer work on the campaigns, and so knowing that no matter what, I'm gonna make the time to get outdoors and be in my body, on my feet, harvesting endorphins. I think that's been really important for me, just to stay grounded and stay in the work.
Yeah, it's sustainability with a different definition. I found a lot of overlap between people who have really demanding jobs, or they're executive level, or there's something outside of sport that they're incredibly passionate about, and the process that they learn from running enables them to understand, like, it's not going to happen overnight. I find this lesson. I enjoy talking with high performers in the business world, or I guess in politics as well, because they understand that, and a lot of times that connection isn't yet made in the brick by brick by brick way that creating anything requires. And so it's cool to hear you apply that to the campaign trail and UTMB trail and everything in between.
Heck yeah. I love that about our community. And I think also like the trail running community in particular, I've noticed a really strong and growing environmental and activism bent that I don't think I'm not sure that it was there like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's really cool to see just like so many of kind of the pillars of the ultra running community and trail community are really active citizens and organizers, and as well as some of the brands, like Patagonia obviously comes to mind. Like that's huge, selling off the company and giving it all to climate activism. So that's something that I find really inspiring about just being enmeshed in this community.
Yeah, and it makes sense though, right? Like, who is going to be most interested in protecting the earth? Well, probably those people who enjoy it the most and who spend a lot of time in nature. And this is the initial conversation I had with Freedom Solar about potentially working together, I was like, look, trail runners care the most, or trail runners care a lot about the ability to drive action and like just get shit done and take control of the path. And so it's cool to see that actually happening. And then you have some really excellent people in the space who use their platform for good. And the more successful they are, the better they are able to actually have an impact. So I'm thinking about people like Stephanie Howe, Abby Levine, Zoe Rome, people like that there are plenty more. And I always hate naming names because I always, forget people who are doing excellent things, and there are plenty of them out there. But just the way that those three people in particular care so much about not just their own performance, but the performance of Mother Nature and the ability to create change.
Yeah, it's huge, and it has, I think, such a snowballing effect too. I think when you are just coming up as a young runner, and you have so many role models like a Stephanie, like an Abby, a Zoe, a Claire, a Peyton, the jerks are super outspoken. Like Killian just started a brand that I haven't dove too deep in it, but the whole point of that is sustainability in the running community. And I think when you have a whole generation coming in with these these heroes of the sport setting such an example, I'm really excited to see what the next 5 years, 10 years down the line look like.
For sure. Let's talk about you and your running a little bit more. So you ran UTMB this year. What was that experience like? What were you thinking about on that start line?
Thinking about how crazy it was. It was just like anyone who's been over there, it is nothing like any trail race that you'll go to in the United States. They're just they're excited about this in a way that I don't think we have quite built over here. It felt like the Tour de France or something. It was a really cool experience. It starts at 6 p.m. in Chamonix, and you are just running for hours and hours through just crowds of people lining the streets through all kinds of villages, just ringing cowbells and going crazy. There's just such a cool energy around it. And then pretty quickly get into the night section. It gets dark, and you're out in some fairly rugged terrain doing really long climbs up and over into Italy. And I think one of the more memorable parts of it for me was just like looking back during some of those climbs, taking glances over the shoulder and seeing headlamps just snaking for miles and miles into the distance was a really cool feeling of just connection to all of the folks doing the race. And yeah, I'd never been to that part of the world before. It was beautiful. It was really cool to be part of a race that competitive. It was a deep field. And yeah, I got to experience some new challenges, like throwing up for the first time during an ultra around mile 89 or so, and pushing through that was interesting.
And what was that finish line like?
The finish line was nuts too. Yeah, they were just going crazy. They have such good live coverage, which is really fun, especially for my mom and dad. And yeah, the finish line felt just like the start in terms of just intense energy and folks out there through the night with folks coming in, and it was just such a cool energy.
So we talked about the start line, which is epic, the finish line, which is apparently they changed up the music this year. So it wasn't just 30 plus hours of the same intense music.
Okay.
But let's talk about in between. What kept you going during the race itself, particularly when things got hard and you started puking at 89, you said?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the more challenging long experiences I've had. I think that was maybe like I want to say it's my 500 or thereabouts, and one of the more difficult ones in terms of just having a hard time finding my rhythm and going through a lot of ups and downs. But I think having the experience of having done a handful, you just kind of know that you're some epic catastrophe, that's one foot in front of the other, keep your fueling going, and you're gonna make it. You just know that you are. It's kind of back a little bit to that, making the commitment, and knowing that the process is going to carry you through. I did question it a little bit post puke. I was like, I threw up, felt great right off the bat. I was like, all right, I'm heading out. Oh, fine, I'll take a few crackers, whatever. And then about a mile off town, I ate a goo, and it just did not sit in my stomach, and I was fighting nausea every couple steps for like 45 minutes, and just could not imagine going another 15 miles or whatever it was to the finish. But just kept really slowly putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually the stomach issues cleared out, and I was able to start running again. And then also the support system. My brother Forrest was able to come over and crew for me, and just having his energy and support and love at the aid stations was super impactful for getting me through the hard parts, and really grateful for that.
I was listening to Courtney DeWalter on the Swap podcast talk about why she chooses to have pacers and crew, and she said for her it's about making memories with these people, and it's got to be such a cool experience to like do it with friends, but I can only imagine doing it with someone you grew up with or family or your parents or whatnot. Was that part of what kept you going, when you had 15 miles and you thought you were going to puke the rest of the way? And I know it's like we all say, yeah, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and like that is the secret. But like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I loved that swap interview with Courtney, and the subtext of that, of just like, yeah, I'm the best freaking ever. Obviously, she's super humble. She doesn't say that, but it's like, yeah, I'm the best ever. I don't need dang pacers, but it's fun to make memories, and like that's the meaningful stuff of life. And I resonated so much with that idea of just like, yeah, it's really about making these memories, and that's totally what UTMB with Forrest was for me. He's the one that really got me into the longer distance running shortly after I graduated college, and we trained for our first 100-miler together and ran that together. And yeah, I think how do you keep one foot in front of the other? I don't know. It's just kind of it's like breathing at some point for ultra runners. I think something you kind of do without thinking about at some point. It's just like, I know the pain is going to stop if I just keep going, and so you do.
It's so fascinating, right? Like we choose this intense discomfort, and there's some, I don't want to say glamour in the struggle, but yeah, like the type 2 fun is so fun. And it's I think if you could just line up for a race and run it and finish and PR every time, like we'd find other hobbies, because it's it's like so pointless to just succeed at everything all of the time. And I think that's the piece that we can carry into life, right? I forget what I was reading, but it basically said the same thing. It was like, maybe it was, Killian's thread was on something entirely different. It was basically like, the point is, we do this, we struggle, we grow. We do this, we struggle, we grow more. We do this, we struggle, we grow more. And it's just like raising the bar and raising the bar and raising the bar. And to me, that's the point. And then obviously the sharing of it with community, which is cool. And then as you elevate your platform through these types of awesome adventures, you can have that greater impact on society, right? Like right now we're looking at Kanye West and his comments about Jewish people, and we're seeing CAA drop him. We're seeing athletes mention that like they need to do something, and Adidas needs to make some sort of statement. And I put out a bunch of tweets about this stuff, and I got a comment saying like, I know you're just as invested as I am in this, being Jewish, but thank you for sharing it. And I'm like, what's the point of having a platform if you don't use it for good? I think it's extremely selfish that like we all have the ability to make an impact, and if you choose not to, I think you're wasting an opportunity.
Yeah, heck yeah. I mean, I totally agree, man. And I think there is, I think both in politics and in running, there's some real magic to be found in the really dark times. It's really paradoxical, but I think it's something that you see throughout philosophy and religion, and the best epics and tales of our time, or any time, is like that darkness, whether it's puking your guts out at 89 in the race, knowing you got 15 brutal miles to go, and how the heck could you possibly do it, or whether it's having someone elected that makes you like seriously scared for the future of your country or the world. It's like those kind of like really deeply challenging or dark or potentially rock bottom feeling times can just do something to us as individuals, or as a collective, that make us come out the other side with just changed for the better. I think with like thinking about 2016 in particular, for me, it was just like I'd organized so hard in the lead up to that election, and then it was just like, wow, we got from my perspective, like we lost hard across the board, and it was really tough. And then but it like shook so many folks to their core, and I've never had more friends and acquaintances just reaching out, being like, what can I do to get more involved? And I think it really shifted my generation in a huge way to pay attention more to politics and get more engaged, and in a way that is largely sustained all the way up until today, 6 years later. And so I think, yeah, just kind of I guess just a shout out to those dark slogs, for sure.
So someone who's listening to this might be wondering, okay, I now understand that local politics, regional politics, national politics are important, or is important, and that's the way we make the systemic change. what would you say to that person listening who is interested in like actually taking a step and doing something to make an impact?
Dive in, commit, plant that flag, and like don't, you know, it. All of this is so dependent on where you're coming at it from. Like, what's the kind of impact that you feel like you are well suited to make, or that you have the fire to jump into. If you're just starting with like registering to vote and taking that simple action of just like voting for the first time, then like, heck yeah, more power to you. Like, that's important. Like, we're all starting from different places. If you come from like a really conservative community and identify with what we're talking about with climate and environment, and feel like you can have productive conversations to shift some of your community there, like, that's awesome. Or if you're like me and you're in a little bit more of a liberal echo chamber, then maybe you can use those connections to raise money for organizations or candidates who are fighting the fight. Or maybe you can get organized and move an institution that you're a part of, or find a local or state level candidate to get really involved with. Work on their campaign. I've been in campaign work for the better part of the last 7 years, and if you have the opportunity to work for a campaign or for a climate organization, I think that's super fulfilling work, and would definitely encourage folks to dive in. Right now, we're in the home stretch to election day, obviously. So one of the most important things that you could do is offer your time to go door to door and help get out the vote for candidates. Like, those face-to-face conversations are one of the most important things. That was how Chloe won in 2018 in a district that had a 16-point Republican advantage. It was all about those face-to-face connections. And then, huge plug for, think about running for office. If that's at all in your like back of your mind, or something that feels within reach, whether that's local school board or running for the state house or for Congress. I think there's a huge feeling of like, oh, I've got to have everything figured out before I jump into something like that. I know even Chloe felt that way, despite being, just the brilliant activist that she is. And you don't have to have it all figured out. You figure it out along the way, and there's tons of resources to support you. And the biggest thing that we can do to make politics better is encouraging good people to run for office. So if you're one of those good people, think about stepping up and taking one for the team. And it can be such a fulfilling process, and you can have such a huge impact at the local level or state level or beyond.
For sure. So let's fast forward, and thank you for sharing that. I think we hear so much about this stuff being important, and it's missing the call to action of like, okay, now what? What do you actually do? How do I internalize this information and not just be like, cool, thanks for sharing, Canyon, but like, thanks for sharing, and I have a plan now. So I think that part is critically important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a few years. Let's say 5 years. What are you really proud of accomplishing that hasn't happened yet?
Yeah. Let's see. So I come at so much of this from specifically a rural lens, where Chloe's from, where we've done our campaign work the past 5 years, is Lincoln County, Maine. It's 100% rural. Tied as the most rural county in Maine, which is the most rural state. And so that's been a huge part of our journey is like, all right, is it possible as a couple of like young, pretty far left, like climate activists to organize successfully in rural America in a fairly conservative district. I think there's a pretty pervasive feeling of like Democrats are, have no chance from the get-go organizing in rural America. And, if they do have a chance, they have to be kind of like a Joe Manchin type conservative character to do that. And Chloe's wins, I think, are a huge challenge to that idea, showing that you can run and win as a progressive Democrat in conservative rural districts. And so, yeah, I think 5 years from now, would love to be really active in supporting other folks to do that, whether it's other young folks moving back to their small hometowns and running for office, or folks that are already on the ground doing this work, to be able to support more progressive rural organizing. Chloe and I just started an organization called Dirt Road Organizing, which is also where folks can see the film if they're interested, dirtroadorganizing.org. And yeah, our hope is to take a lot of the lessons that we've learned through blood, sweat, and tears over the past 6 years doing this, and be able to train other folks and mentor them in doing similar work.
Very cool. What does success look like or mean to you?
Ooh, as like an individual?
Yeah.
I would say, man, that's a great question. I love that. I want to hear your answer too. I would say for me, like the first thing that comes to mind is relationships. I think of myself first and foremost as a really good friend and son and brother, and I think having meaningful experiences with the people that I'm closest with is the most important thing. And then success in other parts of life, I think, is just like making bold claims about the future, kind of back to that commitment, and finding ways to follow through on them with integrity and passion, and hopefully building a lot of positive community along the way and having fun.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah. How about you?
So to me, it's the last conversation, and I reference this frequently. The last conversation I ever had with my grandfather was him telling me his view on the meaning of life. And his view on the meaning of life after 80 plus years was leaving the world a better place than when you entered it. And that's that. Like, very subjective, very broad, and you're in control of that process. And to me, I think success is we need broad goals like that. Like, this is my North Star. This is how I live my life. If I do that, I'm successful. And we need little carrots along the way that help us check those boxes on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, that provide that feedback loop of, are we on our way, or do we need to adjust? And so that realization came from talking with a lot of pro athletes about process versus outcome, specifically a conversation I had with Kat Bradley on the topic around, I asked her, is it all process, or can you be outcome focused as well? And her answer was structured in a similar way. It was focused on the process with little check-ins to sort of guide, but not instruct, the paths to take and the, little check-ins to make sure you're, doing the things that you need to be doing. And so I sort of apply that to the way that you asked that question of success is broadly doing the right thing and giving the people in the future a better experience than we have today, which directly ties into environmentalism and joy and happiness and all this stuff, but also the micro events that make that all possible.
I love that. And I really love the tying in, especially of like environmentalism and thinking specifically about like, how do we leave the world a better place for those that follow us, and including like joy in that equation. There's a awesome Edward Abbey quote that I don't have quite memorized, but it's, to that effect of it's so important to fight for the land, but it's even more important to enjoy it while it's here. So breathe deep of that yet sweet and lucid air, and be as I am, a part-time crusader, a half-hearted enthusiast. And I feel like those are good tenets to live by, of bringing the joy and the fight together.
I love that. Canyon, thanks so much for taking some time to chat today. For those who want to follow you in your adventures on the running trails and the campaign trail, where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I don't really know how to use Twitter, but Canyon Woodward on
Nobody does.
Instagram. Yeah. And yeah, dirtroadorganizing.org. That's where you can plug into more of this organizing stuff if you're interested. See the film Rural Runners, and if you have even an inkling of wanting to run for office or get involved with a campaign or something like that, please reach out, and I'd be thrilled to have conversations around that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks a ton for having me on, Jonathan.